Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. This is the last video, I thought the last one was, but this is going to be the last one in the combat section of the turn phase. Because I didn't really talk too much about these things, and I'd like to talk about them now, and that is, what is the result of your combat? So you've moved in and you've rolled a lot of dice, and what happens then, right? So in some of the cases we've shown what happens. So like capturing a land zone, and we did that here. So earlier when we did land combat, we captured both of these land zones, and we put our roundel on there, and we adjusted the income levels. The French income went up and the Italian income went down. So that's the simple one. The other thing is recapture. If you recapture a land zone that belongs to another member of your alliance, you must immediately return it to that nation's possession by replacing the current owner's roundel with the original owner's roundel. You don't really need to do that though. Like, let's say that the Italians had taken over Tunis here, and then the British came over and took it back. You don't really need to take take a French roundel and put it on. You could just leave it like that, and that's French. You know, like you can tell there's no roundel on it. That means it's French, but it wouldn't be British. Just because the British took it back does not mean it's British. And it's not like in Axis and Allies, where if the French had lost their capital, then the British get to capture it. The British, the French are still in the game. So that's good that you captured this back. Now the French get an extra $1. If they had lost Paris, then they're going to be having a tough time getting money anyway, right? So it's good for them to get that back. Anyway, that's what happens if you recapture it. And then there's also voluntary return. So if a land zone you capture does not belong to your alliance, you may return it to its original owner. Now, you wouldn't do that with the British if you had taken it back from say Germany, right? You would capture that territory. But if you were to recapture a Russian territory, you can give it back to them. So let's say the Germans had attacked this and taken it out, and then the British came up here and took it back. You could make that British if you want, or you could give it back to the Russians. It's up to you. It's up to the British player. But just remember, if you don't give it back, then they might be more inclined to attack you afterwards, right? So it takes a bit of diplomacy to play this game. When you're playing a three-sided game, it's a different dynamic than playing a two-sided game. It's not just me versus you. It's me and him versus you, or you and him versus me, right? So you probably want to give that one back to the Russians, unless it's late in the game and you're trying to take things off of each other as well. You know, like you're not working together so much anymore. Or maybe they're working with the Germans a lot, and you're the odd man out, in which case then maybe you want to keep that territory, right? So let me just finish reading it. This is usually the case when the Soviet or Allied players recapture land zones that belong to each other. To return a captured land zone, simply announce that your intention to do so and move all of your units from the zone. Remove your roundel and replacing the receiving nation's roundel on the zone. So what that means is, okay, if you're going to give this back to the Russians, then you would remove your roundel, and just assume that we had placed one on there, and you move out of there, and now now it's Russia's. Okay, so you wouldn't leave your stuff there and make it Russian. You would take it out and make it Russian. That's how you would do it. Okay, then we've got defeating a player nation. That's something that we did in our attacks here. The French player took out Rome, didn't they? So what happens in that case? Well, all player nations have surrender conditions. Refer to each national reference sheet for details on when and how they surrender. The surrender may be reversed if the status of their surrender conditions change. For example, if Rome is taken by the Allies, then recaptured by the Axis, Italy is no longer considered to have surrendered and would be an Axis nation. So France has taken out Rome, and so the Italians have surrendered, right? But if Germany comes down and takes it back, then Italy's back in the game, and they're back with the Axis again. What happens with their money is Italy would surrender any money that they have on them to the bank. There is only one case in this game where you collect the money from the nation that you conquer, and that's the French. If an Axis power takes over France, which it probably will, it'll probably be the Germans, then the Germans would take the French money and they would keep it for themselves. But in all other cases, when you take out somebody's capital, the money is surrendered to the bank and not to the capturing nation. And that's even if they don't surrender. Like if you take out Paris and the French decide to set up another capital, and we will get it more into those types of situations. I'm going to do a video series down the road sometime about each nation in itself. So that's when I'm doing the French one, then we'll talk about where they can set up another capital and all about the Vichy rules. So then defeating a minor power. So that's like Turkey or Greece or Yugoslavia. So not one of the major powers that you play, but one of the I like to refer to them as neutrals, but they're actually minor powers in this game. Defeat of a minor power occurs when all of the units in the home company or country are eliminated. The player that controlled that minor maintains control of all that nation's colonies and the forces stationed there and all naval units. A minor power that has aligned to a major power does not surrender until the major power surrenders. And the exception to that is the Chinese, both the nationalists and the communists. Even though they're minor powers, they have separate provisions for surrender because they're a bit bigger than these other countries, right? Like they're not just little Greece. There's a whole big nation there, and they've got a whole separate set of rules. So what that means is, let's say the Italians come down and they take out Yugoslavia. The controlling player, in this case, would be the UK. The UK controls everything except for, what is it? Communist China. I think there's another country that the Russians control. I can't remember what it is right now, but for the most part, it's the UK that would roll if the Axis are attacking one of the minor powers. And so what that means is that the UK has control over Yugoslavia while it's being assaulted. So when it is done being assaulted by the Italians, unless they attack this boat at the same time, this torpedo boat destroyer with their navy, then this boat now becomes part of the UK. That'll be a UK boat after that. And then there's also with colonies. So you look at the orange guys up there, and that's the Netherlands, right? When Germany takes the Netherlands out, and they probably will, then their colonies will go to the UK. So there's a colony over here, Dutch Guyana, that will go to the UK, and that's worth one. And then there's all of this stuff down here, right? There's all of these Dutch islands down here, and there's a bunch of units down there. All of these units will become UK units, including the boats, including all the money. And that holds true for all of the nations. Like Belgium, if and when the Germans take out Belgium, then this is a Belgian colony down here, and this will become UK. And so the UK's income will go up by 1. And you could switch this guy over for a UK guy if you wanted to. So that's what happens when you defeat a minor power. And I think that's about it. There's one correction that I'd like to make. While I was looking for rules for strategic bombing, I came across something in a forum that I thought was interesting on the Global War site, and it had to do with carriers. What I was saying in my naval combat video, that would have been a good idea for the subs to take their hits on the carrier because a plane can't land on a damaged carrier. That's an Axis and Allies rule. I just assumed that it was the same rule because it doesn't say anywhere in the rule book about whether or not a plane can land on a damaged carrier in this game. So that's why I assumed it was the same. But somebody had asked that question on the Global War forums, and Will Henson answered that question, and he said that yes, you can still land a plane on a damaged carrier. So I just wanted to make that correction. Planes can land on damaged carriers in this game. Anyway, I don't think there's anything else to talk about as far as combat aftermath goes. There's surrendering your monies with damaged factories, and we talked about paying down damage. That happens on the production phase of your turn, and it's just about taking over people's territories and taking them back and taking back your alliance's territories and giving it to them. And this one over here that we showed here with the Russians, choosing to give it to the Russians if you took it back for them. And that's about it. So anyway, that was quite a weekend. I did all about combat this weekend. So I'm going to go upload this now, and that'll be it for me. I'm going to be eating ham later today. I wish you all a happy Easter. Take care, everyone. General 108 out.